believe we're prepared to go on with item C4, the discussion of CSLB NSCB enforcement options.
Good luck with that.
5, 4, 3, 2. All right, C5. I'm just kidding. We ready for C4?
You're coming.
We're ready. I believe.
Good morning. Again, Paul Rosario with the Nevada State Contractors Board. Both the NSCB and the CSLB will be participating in the NASCLA National Coordinated Enforcement effort scheduled. It's currently going on between June 3rd to June 21st of this year. NASCLA will have state members participating in this event across the country. The states that have been confirmed participation are Arizona, California, the District of Columbia, which I know is not a state, Florida, Mississippi, Nevada, New Mexico, Oregon, Rhode Island, Texas, and Utah. This plan focuses on state boards joining together in a united partnership to promote consumer public protection through the licensing, registration of contractors, and elevating the regulatory agency's presence in the community and nationally. The goal is to protect consumers, deter illegal construction activity, and level the playing field for legitimate contractors in the industry. The enforcement effort is to draw consumer awareness to the protections of the contractor state licensing boards nationally, alert consumers of illegal activities, and how consumers can protect themselves against unlicensed contractors, and inform consumers of licensing requirements. In addition to statewide sting efforts by the California and Nevada boards, the boards will coordinate a joint sting operation this month in the Lake Tahoe area in the upcoming weeks. All statistical information of the national coordinated effort will be sent out on a press release by the respective state agencies. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Missy Vickery, Chief of Enforcement for the Contractors Board for California. I'd just like to start out by pointing out a couple little statistical things. The CSLB receives approximately 20,000 complaints each year. Of those, about 4,500 involve unlicensed activity, and where we go out and conduct stings and sweeps and look for transient criminals who might be taking advantage of unsuspecting consumers. For fiscal year 2017-18, we were able to get about $42 million worth of restitution for California consumers. Going on to the travelers, over the years, we have developed protocol on handling transient criminal activity. This includes the development of a procedure manual that explains how to identify, investigate, and share information with other states. We think that it has been beneficial in curtailing traveler activity in California, but it has not stopped it completely. One example of information sharing between California and Nevada aimed at catching these predators is, in early May, CSLB Northern Swift Unit received a lead from a licensed C12 earthwork and paving contractor in the Gray Eagle area of Sierra County. The travelers were working in the area and offering leftover asphalt for a reduced price and becoming hostile with property owners when they were declining their services. CSLB reached out to the State of Nevada Contractors Board to collaborate after learning that the suspects were staying at a hotel in Reno. On May 6, Nevada investigators confirmed the travelers were staying at 2 area hotels in Reno. The following morning, the Nevada investigators followed the travelers until they crossed over the California border. Most travelers are not licensed in California, but some are and are able to obtain a license. This is done to solicit business from unsuspecting property owners who eventually are scammed in the same manner as the unlicensed counterparts that they travel with. It is common for groups of travelers to gather together in one state and then conduct their illegal activities across the border in the bordering state. In this case, they were buying all their materials in Nevada and then traveling across the border to California to use those materials. The Northern Swift Unit was able to secure a property in Sierra County to conduct a sting on these individuals. Once contact was made, they received a bid for the work for $400,000, but they couldn't perform the work then. We're still actively pursuing these individuals. It is believed that they're still in the Reno area, still performing the work. With the collaboration with the Nevada Board, it's integral in moving this investigation forward, and we hope to further success surrounding this, report further success surrounding this in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Missy. Is there any board or public comment? So we'll be moving on to C5, the discussion regarding recently enacted California, Nevada legislation and enforcement strategies related to solar industry and financing.
Nevada continues to be one of the top solar states, most likely due to the amount of available land and the number of sunny days, which is 294, the third most in the country. In 2015, the Nevada PUC changed the net metering rates in Nevada, causing a serious setback for the residential solar industry in Nevada. The effects of the decision put approximately 2,500 workers out of work in the residential solar industry. Prior to the PUC change in the net metering rates, the board received a significant amounts of complaints against solar contractors. In 2017, the Nevada Assembly Bill 405 was put into law and helped revive the residential solar industry. The bill established a more appealing net metering structure to consumers and also carried some consumer protection provisions for homeowners. With the passage of AB 405, many companies that moved out of the state in 2016 have returned. There are currently over 137 solar companies in the state, employing over 6,500 workers. It appears that the residential solar industry continues to grow within the state, with the 2018 installation numbers slightly lower than its installation numbers in 2015 at the peak. Nevada is ranked fourth in the nation based on cumulative amount of solar electric capacity installed. The state receives approximately 12.7% of the energy from solar, capable of providing power to over 555,000 homes. Utility-scale solar continues to be a fast and growing industry responsible for the overwhelming majority of the solar electricity produced in the state, which I estimate at over 80%. As we have seen a revitalization in the residential solar industry in Nevada through the passage of AB 405, workmanship complaints against solar contractors remains relatively low in proportion to all the complaints received. Over the past 2 years, complaints against solar contractors were approximately 1.6% of the complaints received by the board. On April 29, 2019, SB 358 was signed into law, a bill requiring utilities to get 50% of their energy from renewable sources by 2030. This bill raises what's called the Renewable Portfolio Standard from its current goal of 25% by 2025. So Nevada is definitely moving forward in the direction of renewable energy. AB 465, signed into law this week, requires the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada to establish regulations for an expanded solar access program to be offered by electric utilities. The program would include both utility-scale operations and community-based solar projects that would have to be accessible to low-income consumers. It would operate outside the existing net metering program currently established by state law. The bill also includes a workforce training component, which would be set up in coordination with Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation. This bill sets forth requirements that the PUC must establish. However, it is unclear how the implementation of this bill would impact the construction industry in Nevada. The board has been very proactive in identifying residential solar contractors operating without licensure and ensuring they do become licensed and cited. Some business models for residential solar companies is to allow a third-party unlicensed company to sell and contract for the installation of the solar system. This is a violation of Nevada law in that any party entering into a contract with a consumer for any installation must be licensed. One recent case identified a large national home builder licensed in Nevada whose sister company would contract for the installation of the solar system and sign the power purchase agreement with a new homeowner. The only problem was that the sister company was not licensed. Over 700 Nevada homeowners had contracted with the unlicensed company over the past 4 years. Staff worked with both companies, assessed appropriate fines, and the sister company is now licensed. I'll turn it over to California now.
Yeah, if I could just say a few words before I hand it off to Mike Gymnensi, our Chief of Legislation. What's happening in California is the governor has a plan to build 3.5 million homes in the next 7 years. That's approximately 400,000 units a year that will have a solar component. So there's certainly a great opportunity to meet clean energy goals. While we believe most solar projects are done appropriately, what we have encountered is consumers that have been taken advantage of. We're not seeing, as you're not, also in Nevada, you're not seeing workmanship complaints. We're really not seeing too many in California. It's more about the misrepresentation at the point of sale, where you have somebody that's representing not only the contractor, but representing the lender. So they're entering into a complex financial and contractual agreement at the property, which can put the consumer at a disadvantage. In Central California, we've unfortunately had a number of fairly low-income consumers that were taken advantage of by property assessed clean energy loans, known as PACE loans, where they were basing the loan on the equity in the home rather than the ability for the property owner to make the increased tax payment. And to address those concerns, we've joined a partnership with our Public Utility Commission, and also what we have is a Department of Business Oversight. And the Department of Business Oversight has jurisdiction over a lender or a PACE administrator that would negotiate these financial agreements. So that can be very helpful. We've been able to get some resolution to consumers. In 2018, we were able to recover $2 million for injured consumers that had contracted and paid for solar many times for a solar project that didn't work. But unfortunately, some of these contractors are unlicensed. They are out of business. They don't have the ability to pay restitution, and a consumer then is left with what we call it like a super lien on the home, which could cause them to lose their property. So it's been a real struggle. The California legislators looked at different ways to help consumers protect themselves, and with that I turn over to Mike to talk about some of the recent bills and how they'll be hopefully effective in providing consumer protection.
Sure. So we're on page 373 of your packet, and the first one is AB 1070, which requires CSLB to develop a solar disclosure document, and it requires that we do so in coordination with the California Public Utilities Commission. So what's interesting about this is Mr. Rosario mentioned your AB 405 in 2017. I understand it's your Renewable Energy Bill of Rights. It's a really robust, it looks almost like a solar reform in the area of utilities and net energy metering. The reason why I mention it is because it created a number of disclosure requirements in contracts in the state of Nevada that is quite similar to AB 1070. It deals with issues of transferability, what happens when ownership changes of the panels, warranties, assumptions, and inputs. A lot of this information is what we're having to develop right now with AB 1070 with PUC. The difference is, as far as I can tell, I don't know if AB 405 puts any enforcement requirements on the Nevada Contractors Board. AB 1070 does. So this document that we're developing with the PUC, we're going to have to require contractors put it on their contracts, and if they don't have it, we're going to have an enforcement action. What's interesting about AB 405 is my understanding failure to comply is a deceptive trade practice and consumer fraud. I love that. I'm jealous. Our AB 1070 doesn't really have any teeth to it at all. So that's something we're going to have to work on. But basically, right now, we have a one-page document that we developed with PUC. It goes on the front cover of every residential solar energy contract. If contractors don't have it, then we theoretically can take enforcement action. We're also working with PUC to develop substantial supplemental disclosures to that document. Also, what I'll mention is that it is limited to residential installations and not of a solar panel that's installed as part of new construction. So, for example, the new homes that Dave just mentioned, if the contract is to develop a new home and the solar is part of that contract, the solar disclosure document would not be required. It would only be required if the solar installation is after the fact. So Dave also mentioned PACE. It's important to mention that PACE is not limited to solar, although we see it mostly with solar. PACE is really any clean energy improvement. But the Department of Business Oversight, which used to be our Department of Corporations, is taking a lead role in making sure that the PACE administrators, the entities that finance the PACE loans, are licensed. And that's a new development in California, and it's a major consumer protection effort. So I guess that's sort of where we've been headed, and I can answer any questions if there are any.
I should state that AB 405 does place notification, the contact numbers for the board in those contracts, as well as with the Attorney General's office. Also, it makes the board responsive to the AG upon receiving any, I guess, complaints that are forwarded to us from them. So it's a state really coming together for public, I think public security on this matter, which we've seen a lot of abuse in the past in Nevada.
Yeah.
So.
I have a question for California. So if a homeowner purchases a rooftop solar system and they decide that they want to sell their house, is that next homeowner obligated to take over the payments on that, or how does that work?
It depends on the contract, whether it's a purchase, a lease, a PPA. It depends whether there's a fixture filing. There's a number of different, I'm deferring to our legal counsel. The answer is it depends.
With PACE, it definitely has to, the new homeowner has to assume it, or they cannot purchase the home, which is why we were talking about the super lien. They can't get rid of it in any, because it's funded through property tax assessments, it can't be discharged. And so people either have to get someone to take over the payment of that home, or they have to pay for it, or they could walk away from the home. So with PACE, it does travel with the home. It stays with the property. It's part of the property. It depends on how people finance the solar, as Mr. Jemnitsky mentioned. And in some of these agreements with leases, they claim it's not a lien, but in California, you have to record the fact that there's a lease of a solar energy system on the deed with the county recorder. So that the new property owner has noticed that there is this lease attached to the property, and they have to agree to take that lease over, or that they can't purchase the home. So it sort of functions the same way as a lien, even though in California they're not allowed to call it a lien for a solar energy lease. So it just depends on how the financing is done. If you do traditional financing, then that property owner that sells is responsible. So it just depends on how they financed it.
Thank you.
I have a question, maybe a clarification. So it was stated that California is budgeted for 3.5 million housing units, and it says approximately 400,000 will be built per year equipped with solar. So does that mean that every new house now, in the cost, the price of the house is going to be the total cost for the solar system?
Right.
Correct?
And if anybody does the math, it doesn't quite add up, and the reason being is because there are a number of exceptions as to, there's shading exceptions and orientation exceptions, so not every single home, but the requirement is for new construction that solar will be a part of the home.
Is there also, and I'm not sure if this is the whole state, but some parts of the state, is there also requirements on the homes that they have sprinkler systems in the house? Is that also something that's gone into effect? So now you got two things that you have to have in your home?
I'm not
curious.
as knowledgeable about the sprinkler systems, but some of the board members are nodding.
I can answer that, yes. Fire sprinklers have been in the code book for a couple of cycles now, and the solar is going in the one that will go into effect come January 1st, 2020. Gets published July 1st.
No wonder you guys are moving to Nevada.
Most everybody's going to Iowa or Idaho.
Is there any other board comment? Any public comment? Okay, moving on to agenda item C6, the discussion regarding CSLB and the NSCB disaster response. We have a presentation.
Good morning, Rick Lopes with the Contractors Board in California.
Jennifer Lewis, Public Information Officer, Nevada.
Fortunately, since we met and I think talked a little bit about disaster at our meeting last June, most of the disasters over the last year have been in California. I think Nevada's, been spared pretty well.
That's correct.
So I might be talking a little bit more than Jennifer about this, but we certainly have a lot of the same programs in place since the ramifications of the disasters are the same. So over the last, since October of 2017, when we had the big fires, the main ones in Sonoma County and Santa Rosa, which got a lot of publicity, I'm sure you've heard about, those were just some of them. Since then, we've had disaster declarations in 27 different California counties. And some of the biggest and most disastrous fires have come in the last year. The one of most note that got the most notoriety, I'm sure, in Nevada and around the country is the Camp Fire in Butte County that destroyed a good part of the town of Paradise. Destruction of almost 19,000 structures, the death of 85 people, and just under 14,000 residences. This burned an area of about 240 square miles. And Nancy Springer, one of our board members, she's currently the building official for Sacramento County, but she was the building official in Butte County. They've had a number of fires, probably 3 or 4 major ones over the last few years. So she's very knowledgeable about this. And unfortunately, we've become good, and the local agencies have become really good about responding to disasters because we've gotten so much practice. So the main things that our board deals with is in the earliest wake right after it. The State Office of Emergency Services is really good about opening up assistance centers. They try to make one-stop centers that the survivors of the disaster can go to, whether it be the local county of officials, also like the Department of Motor Vehicles, if they may have lost their license or have to deal with things with their vehicles, many different state agencies. Our board staffs those, which has made one of the ongoing big challenges, especially in the last year where we had situations where we probably had upwards of a dozen different centers open at the same time that we had to staff. And so there have been workload issues that we've had to deal with, and it's all just based on how many centers are opened up. But assistance centers are a good way for us to start to get out the word. And with partnerships, we work very closely with the Department of Insurance as far as getting the early word out. The other thing we do is we are very aggressive about having boots on the ground and going into the disaster areas and posting warning signs. I know you've developed very similar signs in Nevada that you use, but we want to go out and try to do as many things as we can to get the word out. Certainly at the early states in the first few weeks and even first few months after the fires, the focus is on insurance, and the focus is just on where you're going to live during the recovery efforts. Then we're giving them that information. We want to make it at least something, the seed planted for them, so once they get to the point where they're going to be able to look at rebuilding, they're going to be able to start thinking about contractors. They've got the information there. So we do have, with our statewide investigative fraud team, is they're very aggressive about going out and posting signs throughout the different fire areas and doing the outreach, walking the streets, talking to people, they'll come across contractors, they'll give them their business card, encourage them to contact them if they run across any unlicensed contractors out there. In addition to that, they are preparing for future sweeps and sting operations. We'll work with our different partners, Department of Insurance, possibly Employment Development Departments, maybe the Department of Industrial Relations, and actually having, since we all have overlapping jurisdictions, is actually they'll help participate and go on sweep operations with us. And we'll work with the local district attorneys as well. And we'll set up future sting operations in case we get to a situation where we're starting to see that there is a lot of action. We will pose as a victim and do a sting operation. We also do an extensive media outreach campaign. We do some rebuilding workshops, which I'll talk a little bit. I do want to show a video, though, because it kind of does give a nice little overview of it. And then I can talk about just the workshops that we're doing and some of the other outreach things. So actually, I'm going to have from Augie down to Kevin move over. We'll power this up and show you a quick video.
You know, I'm really pleased to be here because it's the culmination of a great effort that we put together with the Contractors Licensing Board. I remember saying months ago when there was still debris in this area that I'm standing in now, if you come here, if you violate the law, I'm going to prosecute you. And I've been true to that word. Not only have we gone after price gougers, but now we're going after unlicensed contractors. And listen, you may ask yourself, what's the big deal? Well, unlicensed contractors bring a lot of workers with them. These workers are not protected. So it's not only the consumer that's at risk, it's the workers that they engage as well. So from a public safety standpoint, this is a serious violation in our community. We are all working together to rebuild Sonoma County. Let's do it in a safe way so that we can continue to thrive.
So unless you want to come to Butte and leave on the sheriff's bus, don't. So what we want to make very clear is that our citizens have been subjected to way too much, and we will take a very, very hard stance on anyone that tries to take advantage of those citizens.
I have a long history of working with our District Attorney Michael Ramsey and have had a history of dealing with the Department of Insurance as well as State Contractors Licensing Board, and I echo all of their sentiments. If you think you're going to come into this community and further victimize my citizens, I will tell you that I will put everything towards preventing that from happening. And I'm glad that I've got great partners here who will pick up the fight and help us hold those people accountable.
Thank you. And as you saw in the video, we noted the rebuilding workshops, and I'll just talk for a moment just about those. In addition to all the local communities that do their own workshops, as we go into the areas too, and we have two different kinds of workshops. One set up for the survivors, where we talk about the process of hiring a contractor, the things you should look for in a contract, and those kinds of topics. We also conduct a completely separate workshop that's geared towards contractors, towards our licensees, trying to prevent problems before they happen. In some cases, because of all the homes that have been destroyed, you may have contractors who are looking to expand their business, maybe either add a license classification or maybe for the first time have employees. So we'll have representatives from, we have a state compensation insurance fund, it's our largest workers' comp company in the state, and they'll talk about workers' comp, the process of getting a workers' comp policy, how it works. So we'll talk about those kinds of things, and we also have the local officials there as well to talk about those specific plan checks and everything that's in place in order for them to do the jobs right, to do the recovery effort right. We hope that this work is being done now will protect us not having to deal with complaints down the road. And the last thing, as far as our ongoing outreach, in addition to the media, we've also done extensive outreach with the local legislature. We've provided them materials not only in their Sacramento offices, but at their local offices. We work with the local chambers of commerce. We get our materials into as many different hands as we can. And we're finding that as time goes on, as we still do get complaints, but overall the number of complaints we get in disaster areas has really gone down, and we think a lot of it has to do with trying to get that word out and having our partners too. It's giving the messages to all these other people, as you can see in the video, that kind of are helping carry the message. So it's just not a CSLB thing that we're doing, and by having the other people carry the message, just extends our abilities to get the information out quickly.
I think it goes without saying that Rick has just done an amazing job. I can't even fathom the amount of effort that it has taken to respond to all of the disasters that you guys experienced this past year. And I just think the video you showed illustrates the collaboration that your state has come to. And I think that's something in comparison that Nevada, while I think we would come together in that circumstance, as we've seen with October 1, we don't have, I don't think, that level of partnership as state agencies. We don't have the California Emergency Management Association, where you guys are constantly working together. So that's kind of a struggle or a deficiency, I think, in Nevada, and something that maybe our board can work to establish better relationships with those agencies in terms of promoting the necessary information that they have to our constituency. So that'll be something that we'll be looking at in this year ahead as we start our strategic plan and the new fiscal year. Nevada's obviously been very fortunate to not have experienced the frequency or intensity of disasters that California has. However, I think the events that have taken place have ignited, no pun intended, the fire in other states to really evaluate their state plans and to start educating their consumers about the disasters that are potential in their state. For us, we do see fire and flooding in the monsoon seasons. Our agency has developed some informational videos that we have available online. We're looking to expand that. As I mentioned, one of the ideas we're exploring are possibly interviewing other state officials that might be outside of our jurisdiction, but have important information for consumers in their time of need, that we could collaborate and kind of share how we would work together in those circumstances when they were to arise. Our state typically sees a lot of disaster response preparedness activities in September. That's Disaster Preparedness Month. So we will be engaging in those. However, I did notice this past year that local agencies have taken it upon themselves, specifically like fire department resources and other local entities are really coming together throughout the whole year. So on monthly occasions, we're holding events to bring the community together, to share these vital resources with them, to engage them and interact them with not only their first responders, but also the other agencies that are there to assist in their time of need. Our board has been actively involved in those, and I think we've seen a really good turnout. It's been nice, kind of different environment for us because we're getting a lot more families versus the, the older seniors that we typically target, or more established homeowners. These are typically newer families with young children, and I think that's good. That's a great demographic that we're able to get in touch with, and it's an existing forum that's exciting for them to attend. So we've appreciated those opportunities. As far as other resources, as I mentioned, we're really learning from California, from Rick's team. They do an amazing job with their social media websites, their technology, the video production, and we're hoping to replicate many of those to bring information firsthand at the convenience of our consumers instead of just doing events and things where people would have to come into attendance. But other than that, I know we don't have a whole lot to share on the initiative, but it's certainly an area that we're hoping to expand so that when the time does come for Nevada, we can be as preventative as possible and make sure that our homeowners are as prepared as possible.
Yeah, one other thing I'll add finally is we talked about it with our board yesterday. One of our strategic plan items for this year is we're working closely with our enforcement division because a lot of their staff are the ones that are involved in the response. Is actually, we were at a point where we were responding to so many different disasters. We kind of just knew what we had to do, but we really didn't formalize our response plan. So as part of our strategic plan, we actually are formalizing our disaster response plan. And it's going to include everything from assignments. We actually have somebody in our enforcement division, one of our supervisors, who's been assigned to be our coordinator. So when this happens, he oversees the development of the personnel list who's going to be responding and staffing centers. So we're actually having specific responsibilities. And certainly once we get this thing formalized and finished, hopefully in the next month or so, we'd be happy to share it with you folks. You'll kind of see the guidelines that we're trying to follow and put together, so we'll be that much more efficient, hoping that won't all get hit by a bus someday and somebody who comes after us are going to have to use it. But we want to be sure, in case something happens, that at least this is memorialized. And so we're almost finished with that project.
Thank you, Rick. Is there any board comment?
I would just like to add that I'm glad to hear that you're going to be looking into this and hearing what Rick has done. He's done a phenomenal job. I've worked with Rick. He's come up to Butte when I worked there. The social media is really important. It's been we're going on 7 or 8 months since the campfire, and I can tell you, I belong to a lot of the Facebooks, a lot of the Twitter feeds, and that's what you're hearing now. It's a comfort to them to see the signage out there, to hear about the workshops and the rebuilding, and they're promoting it themselves by retweeting these out and by posting on Facebook, which is alerting the people that the license board is out there. So if that's something you look into, I would highly recommend the social media, because now that the media is not there like every day, that's the one thing that is there every day, and that's a good tool to use. At the local levels, we all realize disasters have come in almost like a common practice thing, which is horrible, but it is really important that we be prepared and that we use these tools. And again, for staff and Rick, and thank you for everything that y'all do. It's a lot of work and a lot of emotional toll.
Yeah, it is, and it really is a team effort. All different parts of our board. I mean, obviously, public affairs has its role, but enforcement, because of its staffing, carries a lot of that workload. Folks in licensing, people in administration. You know, a lot of times it is all hands on deck, and when there's multiple places, we need to have staff. And part of the challenges in some of these areas that they can be fairly rural, or even in Butte County, is about hour and a half plus from Sacramento. Obviously, all the hotels and places in that area are being taken up by the survivors. So we're having people not only working a 10 or 12-hour shift at the assistance center, they're driving 2 hours each way back and forth. So there's a big dedication that they've got. And also, as you mentioned, and I'm glad you did it, there is an emotional toll, because these people are day in and day out dealing with these people who've lost everything, and there certainly are challenges with that.
Thank you. Is there any public comment? Okay. We'll go on to agenda item C7, the discussion on the CSLB and NSCB workforce development programs.
All right, well, good morning again. The Contractors Board, as Ms. Green alluded to, really became engaged in workforce development initiatives this year, specifically as a result of a lot of the occupational licensing initiatives as part of the National Occupational Consortium and the legislative discussions that have taken place. What our board has done we have partnered with the industry, specifically the Nevada Contractors Association, to start putting on workforce development educational workshops. And we initially targeted high school students because they're the next generation coming forward, and we're really trying to inspire the idea of lasting careers in the trade as an alternative to a 4-year degree course of action. And we've found great success. We partner with the industry, so we actually bring a variety of contractors and people that have been through the course. Many of them have not had higher education training. They simply entered the trade upon graduation from high school, so they're able to share their personal testimonies. We've actually gone as low, most recently we did a middle school, which was interesting. So our conversation shifted a little bit. It wasn't so much about interview techniques and what to prepare for and how to enter the industry, but more so getting them inspired to think about what they do now and the decisions they make in their education and how that could play into a lasting career in construction. Specifically asking questions, how many of you like to work with your hands or get dirty, or how many of you like numbers, and helping them see that, oh, well, I like numbers and that could lead to, these positions, or I like to get dirty, so maybe I want to be a mechanical working on tractors or with my hands. And we've just initially started this. I want to say we've done 5 or 6 programs, and we're looking to advance this program now into the higher education setting, specifically trade programs within the colleges and the universities. And in that case, we're hoping to bring actual, almost like a job fair workshop, where we're not only presenting the information, the opportunities available to the industry, but hopefully connecting people on the spot with job opportunities that are available. As you're well aware, there's not enough workforce to fulfill the amount of jobs that are available. So contractors are really looking at opportunities, and I think making concessions about different ways that they can entice people to enter the trade. So this is something that's still relatively new in our development. We're looking at new ways to work with the industry. It is a little bit outside of our wheelhouse, but certainly we know that it's a topic of interest to the industry, as well as the viability of our business. So we look forward to presenting more on that next year.
In California, we have a workforce development board, and we have a number of California board members here today that I know work closely with that effort. And I was hoping that perhaps one of you would want to talk about the workforce development efforts that you've made. We also have an 8-minute video. It's optional if you'd like to see it, that goes along with workforce development.
Through the chair. Yeah, I'd like to start by saying that the building trades have done an outstanding job in recruiting young, new talent to fill the aging workforce void. As far as the laborers, part of our recruitment efforts is reaching out and working with these community-based organizations, community colleges, and direct entry programs for those that have been incarcerated. A lot of these pre-apprenticeship programs, they differ from training time frame. I know as far as my experience, they've gone up to 18 weeks of training, of vocational training, and those participants are not compensated. It's all, their only motivation is at the end of that training, and they graduate. There's a pathway into the construction industry. We've been successful in recruiting young, motivated, enthusiastic people from these different organizations. They teach everything from basic life skills to safety. The construction industry it's chaotic at times. Have you ever been on a job site? It's chaotic. What else? To just showing up on time, to how you present yourself on a project and what's expected of you. The pre-apprenticeships also, they they instill, God, where was I going with this?
Pride.
A pride, yeah, in their craftsmanship, and again, it's just creating pathways into the construction industry. So with that, thank you.
Through the chair. So last year we had this meeting at our training center in Las Vegas, the Carpenters Training Center, and is where we put together our curriculum. We have our curriculum's called Career Connections. In Northern California, we're in 25 either high school or community-based organizations. We have a program at the Prison Industries Authority. We have a women's program specific to women in Tuolumne County. We have programs that we were able to put together in advance of construction projects like high-speed rail, where we can reach out to the communities along with the building trades and prepare people for these jobs that are coming down the road. Southern California, our counterparts in Southern California, carpenters do the same, and as well as the building trades. But probably the most frustrating thing is when we sit down with schools and we're talking about the other four-year degree. That was something that we were calling it years ago as we were getting into the school districts. And counselors embrace it right up until graduation. And then they kind of focus on the kids that are going to go to the four-year schools and kind of forget everyone else. And we're there for everyone else. This is a great career. We got people like C.C. Myers, who started out as an apprentice, and look at what he became. So we provide and we partner with school districts, community-based organizations. Since the end of the recession, our own Northern California apprenticeship was down to about 1,000 students. We're now about 7,000. And the age is still kind of old. We're still looking at 27, 28-year-olds. But we are reaching out to school districts and showing people that there's a different way of life, a pure way of life where you can work with your hands and your brains in a practical application and someday become a Kevin Albanese or a Frank Shetter, right? Well, you don't want to be a lawyer like Kevin, so we dissuade that part. I'd be a lawyer like Christy. She's smart. Anyway, so, you know, it's very important for people to realize that there is a place where you can make a good living with benefits and support a family and be able to afford those homes that are being built. So that's what I got to say.
Thank you, Huggy.
Got one thing. From Sacramento, where my main office is, the MEP trades have put together a engineering and construction program in one of the high schools, and it goes through for like 4 years. And the students can choose to move into this program. It's like an academy. And it seems to be fairly well received. They will get construction training to they'll get CAD design instruction. So, you know, it's basic to our industry now. So they will understand, whether they're in the field or they go to the engineering side, how to operate computers and basically do all these things. We're concentrating on an underserved school. So many of the kids would be lost if they didn't have an opportunity, so we're trying to provide that. Our first year, we had 148 kids sign up for that program, and the next year we were maxed out. We couldn't get any more. It was 160, and we're doing the same things that you've talked about, David. You know, show up on time. You know, show up on time, ready to work, get your job done. A few kids could not meet that standard. We'll move back to the regular classrooms, but I look forward to, we're going to guarantee the 10% of the students that graduate, the top 10% automatically going to entry into the IBEW NECA apprenticeship program. So I think this program's really going to go. There's a similar program in Stockton that they have actually 800 students in that we modeled our Lincoln High School. Yeah, and they do a very good job. And we're trying to do the same thing up in Sacramento. So just for pointing.
The construction industry in northern Nevada about 15 years ago We've struggled obviously for years, like everybody else, with workforce development. And the AGC, the ABC got together, and we started a charter high school. It's called ACE Charter High School. Stands for Academy for Career Education. And that has been very, very successful. We don't get any support from facilities or transportation. We just get the per head count dollar amount from the school district. So the industry's support of that school was essential. So we continue to support that. We've got about 160 kids. We actually got some transportation issues that we've been working on for years. We finally crossed that barrier and have transportation for some of the students for next year. So we'll have about 200 kids. We have a diesel program. We have an AutoCAD program, and we do a student-built house every year. So we're on our 11th house. When the housing industry was slow, we built tiny houses. So that was pretty impressive, but the kids had to stay on school grounds. You know, right now they get to travel over to the job site. I'm guessing about 85% of them end up going into the trades. The only drawback we have with the diesel program is when those kids graduate, they can immediately go to work, but most of them go to work for the mines, not for contractors. But very, very successful program and strictly supported by the industry. So, and actually, Margie, do you want to touch on our fund, our education fund?
So in Nevada, we have all of our disciplinary fines that we collect from contractors and unlicensed contractors for administrative fines. Those fines are deposited into our construction education account. Through that, we have a separate commission made of 7 commission members appointed by the governor that review applications or grants for awards. And to date, I don't know the exact number. I should have that number. I think it's over $4 million. And so any whether it's industry or any type of education program that's determined to be related to construction can apply for a grant. It's usually, we provide the seed money for those different organizations, but it's been very successful. And now, of course, with our new legislation concerning cease and desist orders and hefty fines, that fund is going to increase even more. So it's been very beneficial to watch these programs come through, and we've had great success from that. So that's another thing we do in Nevada.
Sounds great. Hopefully that's something we could look into as well. Is there any other board comment? Any comment from the public? I believe that is going to be the conclusion of our joint California-Nevada meeting.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Felice?
Marla Richardson,
Aye.
Kevin Albanese,
Aye.
Frank Altamira,
Yes.
Augie Beltran,
Yep.
David Delatorre,
Aye.
David Diaz,
Yep.
Susan Granzella, Joan Hancock,
Aye.
Mike Layden has an excused absence, Frank Shatter,
Aye.
Johnny Simpson,
Aye.
Nancy Springer.
Yep.
Motion passes.
Is there any public comment for the Nevada board?
I would just like to note that we would like to extend our appreciation and gratitude once again to our colleagues and friends at the California Board and all of your staff. We always look forward to these meetings, and I believe this year was another successful and engaging meeting. And so hopefully we'll get to see most of you next year.
Seeing no other public comment, we are adjourned.
Thank you.